Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How the devil are you doing this Friday? It's Friday, or should I say it's Friday. Didn't come around anywhere near quickly enough this time, I have to say. I had a late night on Saturday night last night. Still trying to shake it off. Still trying to shake it off. It's an age thing, I think. How are we all doing? Let me go through very, very quickly. I can say good morning too. I'm going backwards here, actually. Chris Ford says, happy Friday. It's hammer time. It is indeed. Bjarke Tantan has just said morning from Denmark. Good morning. I wish I knew how to say good morning in Danish, but good morning to you. Back a little bit further. There's Jim Turner saying morning, peeps. Morning, Jim. Mark Whiting is here as well. Morning, all. I know Dan Cullen was here before the show began. Although I've not seen him since it began. Maybe he thought better of it. Gary Newhead, good morning, everybody. And happy Friday, everyone. Yeah, happy Friday indeed. And where is Dan? Dan was here at 7:27. Yeah, he really was. And apparently saying good morning in Danish is go Morgan. Go Morgan. Probably doesn't sound like that when you do it with a, with a Norwegian or a Danish accent, but go Morgan. And Mr. Clips of Beast is back again, becoming one of our regulars. And there is Dan the man. There you are. Morning, he says. And Gary Muirhead, when you said Danish, I instantly thought of bacon. Me too. Me too. Is there a better product in the entire world? And apparently Mr. Clips of Beast just says, I'm back daily. I love your streams. Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind of you. Should we start with something that's start? It's quite it's a bit of an up and down show today. I'm going to start with a negative, go through a bunch of positive, go back to negative again. Sorry to send you into your weekend with a bit of negative, but I think you will agree. Anyway, let's start with a bit of negative here. Now, I realise that doesn't look particularly negative because apparently major contractors could be barred from bidding for public sector contracts worth over £5 million a year if they can't prove they pay their supply chain within an average of 60 days. Now, I would imagine there's quite a lot of people in the industry now applauding loudly. Good old the government. It builds on current rules for essential government contracts where suppliers must pay 95% of invoices within 60 days, averaging 45 days overall. Under the new plan, the rules apply to all invoices a business pays, not just those linked to public work. Now, on the face of it, as I say, I'm sure lots of people are saying, well, that's jolly well done, Messrs. Starmer, Rayner, and the others. What about those that have been banned? Or have had director bans for bid rigging and collusion and stuff? They're still on the preferred tenders list for government projects. Does that seem right? Pay your bills late, slap on the wrist, you don't get any more work. Actually, rigging the bids, that's fine. Crack on, crack on. Bit of a double standard, I reckon. Anybody else? Love to hear from you. Let me get rid of that because I do have some more positive things, which is the main crux of the show, including one a bit later on. Well, the last film of the day, we're actually going to take you around the Laurini factory. You've seen the product, but I'm actually going to take you for a guided tour of the factory right at the very end of the show. Before I go negative again, stick around. So let me do the usual. I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road, starting with this. I do need to say a very quick good morning to Ken Hatcher, who somehow managed to start watching yesterday's show. Didn't look at all familiar. I would imagine they all blur into one after a while, but good morning to you, Ken. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Hope all is well in Welsh Wales. He does have some weather, by the looks of it, some good weather, which is nice. We've got the sunshine back, no rain this morning, so all good. Anyway, people, it is Friday, 27th of June. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. And in today's show, Caterpillar's 330 UHD demolition rig reaches out, and I think this may actually be an exclusive that we've got here, thanks to the fine folks at Caterpillar, so thank you very much indeed for that. Wall Demolition tackles post-quake cleanup. I'll tell you more about it when we get there, but we are actually, the film actually comes from Vanuatu. It's an island. I think it's called an archipelago, off Australia and stuff. And they had an earthquake, wall demolition. Couldn't even find Vanuatu on a map, and I did look. We're off to the US with Rock and Dirt, and as I've already said, we're going to be taking a tour of the Laurini factory, where the machinery maverick, Mr. Marco Laurini, makes the impossible possible. Plus, in my morning monologue today, the great divide between what a government says and what it actually does, or expects us to do, which is more the point. I've already done the question of the day, but I'm going to remind you of it very quickly, like this. Yeah, our question of the day today comes from the returning quizmaster, Mr. Gary Muirhead, and his question is this: if you could have any job for a day, what would you do? What would you do? Any job, just for one day. When I was younger, 15, 16, something like that, I probably would have said porn star. But I can't help thinking that requires quite a lot of energy, and I don't really have much of that anymore. Also counts out my other ideal job, which I've had since the age of about 5 to the age of about 18, and then back again. Midfielder for West Ham. That would be quite nice. Now, somebody over on Instagram called Advocate for Nuclear Energy said he would like to be a Lockheed Martin engineer. Very specific, but thank you very much indeed for that. Mr. Clips of Beast would like to be a Formula One driver. Speaking of Formula One driver, just watched a review of the new Brad Pitt movie, Formula One. Looks to be very good, very exciting. Are you into that, Mr. Clips of Beast? Love to hear from you. What job would you like to do? I'm going to go, can't be a porn star. Too much hard work. Can't be a midfielder for West Ham, although, frankly, I'd probably make the team these days. So I'm going to plump for what I consider to be the best job in the world. I'd like to be David Attenborough for a day. Yeah, go and hang out with some penguins or some mountain gorillas. Speak quietly yet knowledgeably into a microphone. Bliss. I could also wear a safari suit. Never worn a safari suit. Like to do that. What have we got here in the chat? Chris Ford would like to be a rock god. Rock god. Do you have a particular god in mind? I'd quite like to be Slash from Guns N' Roses. That'd be quite cool. Dan is only listening because it's very busy this morning. Gary Muirhead answering his own question. He would like to be Samantha Fox's G-string. Let me think. 35, 40 years ago, maybe. Now, can't help thinking maybe a bit cobwebby. Sorry. Jim Turner would like to be the head of the CIA. Jim doesn't lack ambition, does he? Head of the CIA. And what have we got here? Dan says, I'm in my perfect job, plant operator. I was hoping somebody would say that. And our friend Mr. Clips of Beast reckons that the Formula One movie is good. Very good. Jonathan Duras has just joined us. Morning, Jonathan. How are you doing? What would be your ideal job, Jonathan? If you could have any job for a day, what would you like to be? Who would you like to be? What would you like to do? Any one of those will do. Keep those coming in the chat. Let me take that away because it is time to start the show, and I'm going to show you a bit of an exclusive, courtesy of our friends at Caterpillar. Hence the hat. Back after this. So, got a pretty good track record with Caterpillar demolition rigs, and I realise it kind of goes with the job that I do. But I saw the Cat 340 straight boom excavator in Japan before it was launched. I also saw, although I couldn't talk about it at the time, there was another prototype alongside it, which turned out to be the 352 straight boom excavator. But I couldn't talk about it, but I saw it in prototype form, and I also got to see it when it first went to work. First one in Europe was sold to Armac Demolition, and I went and filmed that with Fred. So I, as I say, bit of a good track record with our Caterpillar demolition machines, and I want to keep that going because there's a new film featuring the Cat 330 UHD, and we've got it for you. I'll get to your questions and comments in just a second, but I do need to share this. Our friend, Mr. Clips of Beast over on Instagram, just said, "This is peak male content." I agree. I agree. Listen, I am a very, very vocal advocate for women in construction, women in demolition, but I do realize that the stuff that we put out is very, 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 very butch and manly. Dylan 800 just said, "Pretty awesome. Thank you very much indeed, Dylan. Good morning to you." Jonathan Duras says, "Impressive demo rig." Ken Hatcher, good video. Going back to Jonathan Duras, our question of the day today is, what job would you like to have? You'd like to be a helicopter pilot. That would be awesome. Have to say, my favorite mode of transport is the helicopter. Really love that. Dan says, "Don't think I've seen you wear the same cap for a while, for ages." And I've been wearing this. I did have a break. I did actually go over to an Epiroc hat at one point this week, and I don't know where I've put that actually. I have done a bit of a swapping, but yeah, I mean, this kind of feeds into this from Gary. You seem to be showing a lot of Caterpillar these days, or is it just demolition equipment? It is mainly, well, it is entirely demolition equipment. Are the plant and construction side of the business still not talking to you? Their loss, if so. They're sending me press releases, but no, I think my invitation to the Malaga parties is probably done and dusted for the foreseeable future. But the demolition folks, Gilles and Bert and Jean-Christophe and so on. Listen, I mean, we do have we have the biggest demolition audience in the world, and I think they recognise that. But that does explain the hat. Just not that I'm trying to butter up anyone at Caterpillar, but we've had the immediately after my return from the EDA, we had the Gilles René video. I've also done a couple of tours of the CGT site or dealership, so that was kind of prompted the Caterpillar hat. Also had the Jean-Christophe Etienne interview, and now we've got the 330 UHD. So I had lots of good reasons to wear the hat. Next week, probably switch it out. But Mr. Clipser Beast says that's a pretty good hat. I have to say, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, there are only 2 of these hats in the UK. I don't know if you can see it. Quickly, there you are. I don't often do this. There's an Italian flag on this because it comes from Italy. I've got one, and somebody else on the show has the other one. I'll leave you to figure that out. It is time to crack on. Let's enough talking about hats. We're talking about earthquakes in a minute after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
I found this one really interesting. A big fan of Wood Demolition, for one thing. They do what they do very, very well down in New Zealand. But they are part of a crew that is basically rebuilding or making safe and then rebuilding the isle or the archipelago of Vanuatu, which is there in New Zealand. It's off the coast of New Zealand, but it's miles from freaking anywhere. As a result of which, they've had to do a lot of their work with the best tools they had available, and they've done it very well. This is about nearly 6 minutes, this film, but I think it's worth it. Sit back and enjoy. This is our first visit to Vanuatu.
Hi, I'm Dalton Ward from Ward Benay Demolition, a collaboration between New Zealand-based Ward Demolition and Benay Enterprise. In December 2024, there was a magnitude 7.3 earthquake which struck Port Vila. The earthquake caused extensive damage and pretty much shut down the whole centre city of the island. Time was crucial, so we mobilised immediately, adapting the resources readily available, meaning the first building we started with, which was the French, New Zealand and USA Embassy. We only had a 50-ton digger with a rock bucket and a 20-ton digger that we had a breaker and a rock bucket. We then created a prodder, or a big long stick on the end of the digger, hollowed out the inside of a breaker and put an I-beam through it, gave another 3-4 metres reach. This was crucial on the embassy building as it was close to a neighbouring building and it was out of reach of our current machines that we had available. We managed to find a grapple lying in the jungle, which was an absolute momentous find for us, even though the locals didn't understand or know what the grapple was, but we were very excited about finding it. Chantilly's hotel was demolished in a day and the site was completely clear within 2 weeks. We made do with the machines we had available for the first few projects, including Chantilly's and Olympic. Olympic took 2.5 weeks to complete. That was a city blocks consisting of 5 buildings. we'd barged 350 tonne of equipment from New Zealand over to Port Vila, which enabled us to pretty much move a lot more quicker and approach some of the higher risk buildings such as Laurini House. Laurini House was a 5-story building with just a very high lift shaft on it. It was extremely compromised on the bottom floor. We had to mobilise our high reach and a crane curtain which we made on the island and pretty much just chew it down as it wobbled away.
Laurini is the most complex building to demolish among all of the buildings that have to be demolished. We are preparing some side propping to avoid collapsing of the structure onto other buildings, and using the long reach will make the demolition safer. The government have set the goal to reopen the city on the 15th of April, and to meet that target we have put in place a large fleet of demolition equipment and specialized operator to make sure that it will happen.
Laurini House took a week to demolish and another 2 weeks to clean up. The National Bank was completed within 4 weeks. It had large foundations. We ended up having to salvage quite a lot of safes and materials for the bank out of the National Bank. We've completed 15 structures within 5 months, with 5 more projects to go awaiting approval. Some of the key to the speed on the island was having the 60-tonne payload GNAFs. They're an 8-wheel truck that has a rear wheel steer, and they sort of navigate everywhere you can get a sort of an 8-wheeler truck, but they're twice the size. These were a prototype out of China that never really made it into production. They ended up sort of on the island through Pierre. One of these trucks is equivalent to 3 trucks in New Zealand. Time was of great importance to get the local economy moving again. As a company, this is some of the most rapid demolition we have ever seen in our career.
Couple of takes on that, and hats off, by the way, to Ward Demolition for dropping everything and making that happen. Gary Muirhead has just said, demolition old school, excavator and bucket, no fancy attachments. I remember pulling down the Glasgow tenements with a Cat 235 and a digging bucket only. Yeah, absolutely. You use what you can. Speaking of which, over on Instagram, Dylan800 just said, crazy without a thumb. And I've responded to say, can I assume you're in America? Yeah. Or North America, somewhere like that, because thumbs very much an American thing, or a North American thing. Not, certainly here in the UK, very, very rarely see one. And Gary also says, crazy to think about the power of nature can do so much damage with an earthquake. And, it was a big one. What was it, 7.3? But, in the grand scheme of things, not as big as some. So Jonathan Duras has just said, very interesting video. Yeah, I thought so as well. And Dylan800 is in America. Yeah, Dylan, as I say, thumbs are very much an American, Canadian, North American thing. Not so much elsewhere. Not so much elsewhere. But thank you very much indeed for your comment, and much appreciated. What do we got next? Oh, yeah, we're going. But funny enough, I've just talked about Dylan, who is in America. That's exactly where we're headed in just a moment, with John Deere and Rock and Dirt.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Story speaks for itself on this one, so let's head stateside and let them tell their own tale.
I started this company when I was 19. I was doing side jobs, odds and ends stuff like doing driveways, sewer repairs, and water repairs.
We bought a single axle dump truck and went out and started doing side work.
He has got a talent that I haven't seen in people for a long time. I have so much respect for him being such a young guy, being an owner.
Nicholas and I decided that we were going to start our own business together. It kind of morphed into large commercial, industrial, and municipal work. So here we are today, 12 excavators later, actually a total of 40-some pieces of equipment, and 27 guys working for us.
We're a lot larger than where we ever expected to be.
What made me decide to come to Rock and Dirt is the family atmosphere, and they really put safety first. That is huge to me.
We do a lot of emergency services for the university here in West Lafayette, and that's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365-day a year venture. So it keeps us very busy. Typical site that we do, they're postage stamp, very small, very tight quarters, a lot going on. We got a smart detect with John Deere. The younger guy is, i.e. Nicholas, said, hey, let's jump on board with this.
For tight sites like we do, it helps out because there's a lot of obstacles and people going around, and we work on a campus and students just walk everywhere.
In the 724, we have the smart detect system. It's really good on the campus we work on. The person walks behind it, it's really loud. That alarm goes off. They're going to hear it, and they're going to know that's something different than what they normally hear. And it's not a normal backup alarm. It's very beneficial for what we do around here.
We use it for our general contractors, and it shows that we're being safe.
I receive emails through Operations Center. If we have near misses, we turn around and I'll share it with the crew. And then we also share it with our general contractors, safety team, or their on-site folks. It's becoming a valuable asset for us.
It protects us in the long run.
Highly recommend it for anybody.
Do like people embracing technology, even more so when they're embracing it for the sake of safety. So hats off to Rock and Dirt. There, Gary Muirhead has just asked an additional question. He's already done the question of the day, which is, what job would you most like? And he's asked another one. What's everyone's plans for the weekend? Personally, got to charge a lot of stuff. Cameras, drones, microphones, and various other bits and pieces, because as you all know, and I will remind you again on Monday, I'm off to Nuremberg on Tuesday, first thing Tuesday morning. So there will be a show on Monday. No show Tuesday, no show Wednesday, back Thursday, Friday. So please try and bear that in mind. Try not to send me WhatsApp messages, because if I'm not here on Tuesday or Wednesday, remember, I did tell you that. So that's part of my plan. Got to do a bit of tidying up in the garden. Also want to get this beard a bit tidier, because frankly, I'm starting to look a bit like Santa Claus. So anybody else, what have you got planned for the weekend? I'll tell you what I've got planned next, and that is a trip to the factory of Laurini. Back after this. Now, a couple of things. Was it yesterday I showed you the Setanta from the fine folks at Laurini? I think it may have been. So first and foremost, we've done a different cut of it. Let me just put that in the chat right now. I say we have. That's not true. Fred did. No, that's not how I wanted to do that at all. Bear with me 1 second. I need to copy that and press that and print that and do that. Okay, so there is. You remember the Luciano Pavarotti song Nessun Dorma? I know it sort of leapt to fame when Italy hosted the World Cup a few years back. Well, Fred has done a different take of the Setanta machine, and it's featuring Nessun Dorma. So that's one thing. All of that aside, you can go and have a look at that at Demolition Insider whenever you see fit. But in the meantime, in addition to going to Laurini to film the Setanta, which was the main reason for being there, we actually got a guided tour of the factory. You know, the place where the impossible becomes possible. I'm going to take you around it. Right, well, I say I'm going to take you around it. Marco Laurini is going to take you around it. I just provided the music. Sit back and enjoy. Now, I am planning to write. I'll do this first. I'll tell you in the story in just a moment. Jonathan Dura says, Laurini seem to manufacture and convert some amazing kit. They really do. They really do. And absolute pleasure to be there. It really was. One of the things I'm planning to write my sort of diary of my trip to Italy at some point in the not too distant future. One of the things that stood out for me with getting the guided tour of the factory with Marco Laurini, I've been to literally hundreds of factories over the years, and they do start to look very similar after a while. And you do tend to get, factory heads or managing directors or section heads or whatever it might be, and they take you through, oh, there's this lathe here and there's this CNC cutting machine over here, and they get awfully excited about it. Marco Laurini was actually asked to slow down because he was just walking through the factory, just going, and in some ways it was dismissive. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've realised exactly why it's dismissive. He sees those presses and cutting machines the same way that a baker will see a dough hook, the same way that a carpenter will see a chisel. Just a tool to realise his vision. As I say, not dismissive as in, the people that work these are rubbish. Absolutely not. A proper family business with family values and everything else. But as far as the actual hardware, it was like, all of this exists just to make that. That's the way he looked at it. I'm looking forward to writing that bit of it. Gary Muhad says, Laurini, a dreamer's playground. Yeah. Well, as you well know, Gary, it says on his business card, CEO and dreamer. Imagine having the balls to carry that off. Dan says, that is a machine of absolute beauty and looks different and very different looking. Yeah, it is very different looking. As I say, looking forward to seeing it go to work. Anyway, people, very quick reminder. Show on Monday, no show Tuesday, no show Wednesday, back Thursday, Friday, because I'm going to be in Germany with the fine folks at Volvo. The other thing I'm going to do is find my Volvo hat, because, I like to do those sort of things. So that's about it for the main part of this morning's show. It's also the main... that's about it for the week as well. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Hope to see you again very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back after I've played the animation. And we are talking about the government. I mean, obviously it relates to the industry we're in, but we're going to be talking about the government. So if you're feeling a little perturbed about Messrs. Starmer and Co., stick around, because I'll be back after this. There has always been a divide between the ruling and political classes and real people. And never is that divide more evident than during times of war and conflict. They declare war and drag us into battles they have no intention of fighting themselves. When they say we are at war, what they really mean is you are at war. They'll be over there somewhere, quaffing champagne at the taxpayers' expense until it's time to go on TV to claim our victory. Prime ministers, presidents and kings would, I am sure, be a little less trigger happy if they were required to pull the trigger themselves. But that disconnect between them and us doesn't begin and end with war. Here in the world of demolition and construction, we too are part of the royal we, expected to do the hard work and embrace the danger while someone else takes the credit and the glory. In the run-up to the last general election, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer pledged to build 1.5 million new homes within 5 years. He said, we will get shovels in the ground, cranes in the sky. Unless he's secretly studying for a CSCS card or earning his crane licence between G7 and NATO meetings, what he really meant was that you would get your shovels in the ground and your cranes in the sky. And this isn't a one-off. At the launch of the new Construction Skills Mission Board, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said, we are working hand in hand with industry to recruit thousands more workers into skilled construction jobs. Are you, Angela? Are you really? Or are you just making a promise that you expect somebody else to deliver? In truth, that new construction skills mission board, which is tasked with magically producing 100,000 new workers out of thin air, is the ultimate proof of the disconnect between government and the construction sector. Think about it. If you want to work on a government or local authority project, you're expected to provide evidence that you can not only deliver, but deliver on time. You must outline your resources and materials, disclose your insurance, and prove you have the financial capacity to see the job through. You must demonstrate that your workers are trained, competent, and carded, and that your equipment meets the latest environmental standards. Depending on the project, you might also have to undergo background checks more thorough than a passport application. In other words, you must prove your capability long before you're allowed near the site. But when the safety boot is on the other foot, there's no proof, there's no evidence, no scrutiny. A government minister makes a sweeping declaration on TV and then walks away, expecting 2.5 million demolition and construction workers to turn a soundbite into reality. Now, leaving it to the experts is fine. That's why we have them. But surely it would make more sense to consult with those experts before committing them to the impossible. When Starmer announced his plan to build 1.5 million new homes, Labour supporters applauded. Many hoped it would ease the housing crisis. Even the press parroted the pledge. The reaction in construction circles, however, was very different. Before the ink was even dry, industry professionals were already asking, how? The sector has consistently fallen short of annual house building targets for decades. The UK planning system is a slow-moving clown car driven by the incompetent and the recalcitrant. And that's before we address the PPE-wearing elephant in the room. We don't even have enough construction workers to meet current demand, let alone the dramatic influx of new housing projects. Which brings us back to the Construction Skills Mission Board. We're now nearly a year into Starmer's prime ministership, and his promise of 1.5 million new homes is just as unrealistic today as it was when he first floated it. Instead of admitting the pledge was campaign fodder, a little white lighter granting the keys to number 10, his party has now promised something else: 100,000 new construction workers. The Construction Industry Training Board, the Construction Leadership Council, and the wider industry have all consistently failed to attract enough people. But sure, maybe an Angela Rayner soundbite will succeed where those with actual experience have failed. Of course, neither the CLC nor the government has provided practical details on how this new target will be met. And there's another PPE-clad pachyderm in the room that no one is talking about. According to the CITB, the UK construction sector recruits around 200,000 new workers each year, but it simultaneously loses 210,000 workers to retirement and disillusionment. Even setting aside the loss of experience, that leaves us with a net deficit of 10,000 workers every year. In a report published last year, the CITB said we would need 250,000 additional new workers by 2028, and that was before Keir Starmer's housing pledge. But will Keir Starmer lose sleep over this? Will Angela Rayner lie awake at night worrying that her workforce promise won't materialise? Of course not. Their job is done. They said a thing we all know to be impossible, and they have already moved on. Now it's down to us to make it work. There you are. And just so you know, that Construction Skills Mission Board, that was the big announcement from yesterday. If it had dropped about an hour earlier, I would have done that one yesterday, but obviously didn't have a chance to react to it. So there's my take on it. 100,000 new people obviously fall short of the 250,000 the CITB is talking about, and it makes no allowance for the additional housing that's required and that Keir Starmer still believes he can do. And it also makes doesn't address this notion of we're attracting 200,000 workers every year and we're losing 210,000. What does that tell you? So, into the chat. Mick says, morning all, the hound done a bunk, so a bit late. Is he safely back? Is the hound back? That's the important thing of the day. Far more important than anything I've said so far. But yeah, just want to go back on that. We're attracting 200,000, but we're losing 210,000. Now, I realise we have an ageing workforce. It's something we've talked about on this show a lot over the years. But I wonder how many of those are lost to disillusionment. You know, they just wake up one morning and just go, do you know what? No, bollocks. I'm done with this. I bet there's a lot. I wonder how many we also lost to when grandfather rights was knocked on the head. I wonder how many good, experienced people woke up that day and went, nah, I'll go do something else. And I think one of the important points to address with this constant balancing act, if you imagine the construction workforce as a funnel, those that are falling out of the bottom, either through retirement or disillusionment rather, or because of the loss of grandfather rights, all of those are dyed in the wool, experienced, knowledgeable people, and they're falling at the bottom. What we're pouring into the top, that's me pouring, by the way, what we're pouring into the top, by and large, are young, inexperienced, green, wet behind the ears, zero experience, young workers. The maths of that don't stack up. How long does it take you to become, and I'm talking about properly competent. I don't mean plastic card competent, I mean properly competent. 5 years, maybe? Experienced, I would say 10, but properly, standalone competent, 5 years, maybe? So we might pour in 250,000 at the top end, or 200,000 at the top end, and lose 210,000 at the bottom end. But that bit between, we've lost experience and we've got inexperienced. So that's not an immediate fix. That's a fix which, assuming they stick around for long enough, that's a fix that will actually become useful 5 years down the line. It's a set of maths that don't make sense. And as I say, my biggest concern, and with all of this, was it seems to me that the Labour government have compounded one problem and one failed promise with another problem and another potentially failed promise. We will deliver 1.5 million new homes. Here we are. We're, I think July is the first anniversary of Keir Starmer's government. Has anybody seen a sudden upsurge in house building? If anything, I think we're slightly down. So there's a promise that has thus far has failed to materialise. And we're now, a year on, somebody has clearly taken somebody in the government to one side and said, one of the reasons we can't do a 1.5 million new homes is because we don't have enough people. And now they've come out with another new promise, which is being backed by the CITB and the Construction Leadership Council, and they've said we're going to have 100,000 new people. And the very fact that they've stood there with a straight face while Angela Rayner has done a soundbite bit and said we're going to deliver 100,000 new people, even though we can't do that currently, and we can't tell you how we're going to do it. What are they going to do? Press gangs? Are we going to have high-vis clad people roaming the streets and just dragging young people out of nightclubs and forcing them into labour? Because unless you do that, you're really going to struggle. Mick says, as I said yesterday, who the hell is going to train them? And where have the trainers got the experience to do so? Exactly. I mean, even if, and I'm sure we touched on this yesterday, even if Angela Rayner were in possession of a wand, she's a little witchy at times, I would say, a magic wand that says, there you are, abracadabra, we have 100,000 new workers, miraculously queuing up outside demolition and construction sites the length and breadth of the UK. But we need to train them. Who's going to do that? Do we have the resources? Do we have the people? Do we have the facilities? Is the card schemes, or are the card schemes up to that? How long does it take you to get a card at the moment? A couple of weeks? Once you've been approved, a couple of weeks? What would that be? A month? 2 months? It doesn't make any sense. And one of the things, and I have to say this, one of the things that pains me about my profession these days is I see it most evidently in America, where Donald Trump lies through his teeth and nobody holds him to account. Same thing here. I don't know what the score was, but my guess is when Angela Rayner talked about her construction skills mission board, it was probably done with the Times and the Telegraph and the Daily Mail and people like this. I would like to think that if somebody from Building Magazine or Construction News or Construction Index or Construction Inquirer or this guy had been there, the first question would have been, how? How are you suddenly going to do what a highly experienced and highly professional industry has completely failed to do for decades? What is your secret recipe? Do you have a potion? Are you going to bewitch the youth and convince them that construction and demolition is the way forward? How are you going to do that? But no, my part of the industry, basically, as I say, the Times, the Telegraph, and so on. Oh, Angela Rayner promises 100,000 new construction jobs. How? Where? When? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. And the crazy thing with this, much the same as the 1.5 million new homes, which is where Donald Trump is better at lying than Keir Starmer. Donald Trump says things that are just so out of left field that he has no need to back them up. Whereas, we will be able to judge the government on this. When Keir Starmer's first 5 years are up and there aren't 1.5 million new homes, we'll be able to say to him, you lied. You failed. You failed to deliver on your promise. When Angela Rayner, when we ultimately identify the fact that she didn't wave a magic wand, she didn't deliver 100,000 new workers out of a hat, we'll be able to say to her, you promised and you failed. They've set themselves up for failure. Jim Turner says, governments don't build anything. They just collect tax and waste money. That's fairly standard. But what they can do is make it easier and more profitable for the private sector to build. Then the country will have a more stable economy. Yeah. Now listen, on that subject, this is something that we used to touch on when Neil Edwards was a regular on this show. One of the things, there's Jim again, by the way, give planning and tax breaks for firms with a certain percentage of apprentices. There's one thing. One of the biggest things, and this was kind of Neil Edwards' mantra, the lack of clarity, I guess. If instead of pledging 1.5 million new homes, Keir Starmer had said, we have set aside £10 billion that will be used purely to address the housing crisis. Okay? It won't be squandered by Crangos. It won't go over here. We won't use a little bit over here for the National Health Service. We won't use a little bit to fight immigration. We have set aside this much for house building or for rail or for infrastructure or for civil engineering. We have locked it away. It's within a fence. Nobody can touch it unless it's for those specific things. The industry itself would then look at it and go, I can have a bit of that 10 billion. If I do more house building, I fancy a piece of that. That would be absolutely brilliant. And if on top of it, as Jim has said there, if you could actually give tax breaks to the firms that are taking on more apprentices, training them up in the right way, you would start to address it rather than these airy-fairy, plucked out of thin air 1.5 million new homes. Who's going to build them? On what land? What planning permission have you set in place? Who is going to build them literally hands-on? Who's going to train the people to build them hands-on? They've put the cart not just before the horse. They've put the cart in a completely different field to the horse. Horse is over here, ready to go, and the cart is over yonder because the government hasn't got a fucking clue what it's doing. It's the absolute truth of the matter. Anyway. I'm not going to turn this into a political rant because it is the weekend and I'd like to send you all off cheerful and happy. So, that will do us for today. Do us for this week. I'll reiterate. I'll do it again on Monday. Here on Monday, here on Thursday, here on Friday, no show Tuesday or Wednesday, no shows whatsoever, because I will be in Nuremberg. I am not going on trial, I promise, but I am going to see an all-electric demolition site, which I'm really looking forward to, because I love to be proven wrong. For a long time, I've been talking about the fact that electric is great in things like mines and quarries. Not entirely convinced about it on demolition sites. Well, Volvo, not surprisingly, apparently have proved me wrong. Looking forward to seeing it. Mick says, we're just trying to work out how much money will be made out of all the new cars that we made out of this 100,000. To be honest, I gave up trying to think of the amount of cars needed. Yeah, because it's... I'm sure somebody on high is now sitting there thinking, 100,000 people, that would be 100,000 cards. No. Be an initial 100,000 cards, then they'll all go off into their different skills brackets and they'll have cards for that as well. And maybe more than one per person. Have you allowed for that? Have you given that any consideration? Did anybody tell you about it? Or, I mean, I do sometimes wonder, that 1.5 million new homes, while it was initially welcomed for about the first 10 seconds, I think the industry was probably sat there thinking, if they'd have asked us, we'd have told them, be a bit less ambitious. We're averaging about 250,000 and we're struggling to do that in the current situation. Maybe you want to ease back on that. Maybe you want to give that a bit of thought, but no, they just plowed ahead. On this instance, with the Construction Skills Mission Board, apparently this has been done in conjunction with the Construction Leadership Council and the CITB. Why is the CITB or the CLC not taking it to one side and saying, you do realise the repercussions of this? You are aware of that, right? Dan says, have a fantastic weekend, guys. Stay safe, stay happy, and in love. Sorry, not on the show as much today. Not a problem at all, Dan. I'm sure you'll be back in all guns blazing. Jim Turner says, take every new house, 150 house plus housing site in the country, and put pop-up colleges on them. Percentage of the housing will be solely apprentice built, material supplied by the house builder, the tutors supplied by the government. You see, if Keir Starmer or Angela Rayner had phoned him rather than phoning their PR and press people, maybe it would make a bit more sense. Mick says, oh, well, perhaps Italy was a great idea. Let me tell you, Mick, in my experience, and I have extensive experience in this, Italy is always a great idea. I don't care whether it's the north or the south. I don't care whether it's summer or winter. I don't care where you are or what you're doing. Italy is always a great idea. And on that note, I'm going to love you and leave you. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'll see you on Monday for the first of only 3 shows next week. See you then. All the best.